Last week, Piers Morgan and Green Party co-deputy leader clashed over trans people. Morgan, in a transparent move to remove any form of dignity towards trans people and try and catch Millward out with a gotcha, asked her the question, you know what it's going to be. But Millward's answer completely embarrassed him.
There's no love lost between you and Zach.
Do you think women have penises?
Do you know what, Piers? I think you have a uniquely strange obsession with people's genitalia.
It's a pretty straightforward question. Straightforward question.
I'm sorry, that's a weird question.
It's actually a straightforward question.
Piers, it's a weird question.
What's the answer? What's the answer?
The answer is the trans community in this country are treated appallingly. This is a vulnerable group of people.
But that wasn't my question. That wasn't my question.
It's not.
You don't want to answer, do you?
I'm telling you that I think
you don't want to answer.
I'm telling you.
Because of the woman, you know it's ridiculous.
I know that you're being ridiculous.
Really?
Honestly.
Why am I ridiculous?
Let's hear from our audience, because they've...
I love that answer so damn much. It's good in multiple ways. One, because it makes Piers look like an idiot. I mean, that's what we should be deploying, by the way. To say, why are you obsessed with genitals? You're weird and creepy. Stop thinking about what's between people's legs. Do you wake up in the morning and think about penises? There's nothing wrong with thinking about penises, by the way, but just admit that. But two, it also doesn't degrade Rachael herself or trans people more widely by dignifying it with an answer. Now, my assessment as to why it's not good to answer that question is, one, the question's asked in bad faith. I mean, Piers Morgan isn't concerned about the trans community. I mean, he tweets later on that, I'm not transphobic. I just want to ask that question. The thing is, though, if by denying trans people's very existence isn't transphobic, then what is? But two, you're not interested in a conversation. Now, had Rachael Millward said, yes, a woman can have a penis, of course that provides the soundbite that Piers Morgan was expecting and hoping for, and then she gets clipped up everywhere saying, oh my God, she thinks a woman can have a penis. But also, Piers Morgan wouldn't have responded by saying, but why do you think that? He would have went, see, you're crazy, you're crazy. And this is the thing with gender criticals. They'll ask you, can a woman have a penis? And the thing is, though, they're just obviously saying, well, the left are stupid because they can't answer the question. We can answer the question, but as soon as we give the answer that you want to hear, you're not happy to have a conversation. You're not at least intrigued to say, well, why do you think a woman can have a penis? Because I can then say, well, guess what? Sex and gender are two different things. Gender is a social construct. Gender is no more real than it is to label something a chair. And then you get into a far more nuanced conversation about human biology. Because, of course, gender criticals say, well, human biology is obvious. A man's a man, a woman's a woman, that's it. Why are you so fucking arrogant? Why not be humble and understand that there's so much more to learn about the human body? In 20, 30 years' time, there might be some more science communication that comes out that even gender criticals can't ignore. So it's just not playing ball with it. But I thought it was a fantastic answer. Now, look, question time isn't a real debate format. It's a place where people can just shoot their talking points. I mean, we talk about trans people. We have lots of trans and queer viewers. I'm happy to have a discussion about it. But if I'm going to be on a panel and I know you're looking for that answer, I ain't going to satisfy you. And guess what? The audience, they clapped with Rachael. Now, speaking of Rachael, I caught up with her earlier today to discuss what happened on Question Time and transphobia more broadly. Piers Morgan did the whole, can a woman have a penis? Tell me your response to that. I mean, it's very difficult to try and answer something in that debate format. But yeah, what are your thoughts about Piers Morgan springing that on you?
The thing is that it's just such a kind of degrading question. It's just a really revolting, obsessive starting point, isn't it? It's just the wrong way in. And I'm not, he's asking it in bad faith. It's not a serious question. It's another reason for him to mock trans people a little bit more. And it's like, I don't know, I've had messages, I think particularly from people in the queer community more widely, trans community obviously, but also parents of genderqueer kids who sort of said, thank you so much for just like stopping him in his tracks and standing up for us. And it's just that thing of like, I don't know, it's degrading. We don't need it. Why would we even go there in that way? But yeah, he's a nasty man. And also people sort of saying that the impact of the way that he talks to and about trans people is real, right? And the impact of this sort of revolting response to the trans community online in particular, and now I'm kind of getting that, it's like that response, it's not a joke. Like, people can sit there and say all these nasty things, but there are real humans who suffer real abuse in their daily lives for being who they are. And this is never okay.
It was cathartic to watch, and I think it's you answered in the way I just would have answered, because look, I understand when it comes to question time. Look, I don't buy into these debate forums. They're not debates. They are talking points. Which party can put across their talking points? And when it comes to trans people, one, just for dignity reasons, you can have a long conversation rather than just point scoring, which is what Piers Morgan is doing. But the right wing or gender criticals want you to say the soundbite. So Piers Morgan says, can a woman have a penis? If you say yes, there is no further exploration there. There's not even like, oh, but why do you think that? It's like, oh, see, you're crazy, you're crazy. So like, it is obviously difficult to convey that, but also at the same time, I think you're right. Even answering that question in their framing is wholly undignifying. Now, Piers Morgan has been tweeting at you. Of course, you've been Rachaeling him back by pointing out that he's just obsessed with genitalia. Again, brilliant response. But he says, I'm not transphobic. I don't have any animosity towards trans people, but I just want to know this question. I feel like that's a load of rubbish. A lot of people who say, no, I just want to know the answer to this question.
Of course it is. I mean, it's ludicrous, isn't it? It's also just, I mean, if there was a real conversation, it would be a conversation about human beings being kind of endlessly complex. And that is actually a wonderful thing. It's actually not just human beings. It's actually all biological species are endlessly complex. And things don't fit into these delightfully clear categories, should you think that kind of clarity is delightful. I actually think it's quite delightful that, that we don't fit into these kind of perfectly drawn categories. And I think we just got to get used to that and get over it. Like, for me, it's actually just as simple as that.
It's odd because people will often tell you it's a biological reality, but actually, like, maybe we need to be a bit more humble and understand there's so much about the human body we don't understand, and maybe it's way more complex. Who knows in 20 years' time that everyone is ultimately going to accept trans people because they're going like, oh my god, it is biological reality. Like, we should be so arrogant to assume that we know everything there is to know about the human body.
Something though that just to jump in there is that there's an arrogance which I find, there's a real deep arrogance in telling somebody else that their lived experience of the world isn't correct and that you understand who they are better than they understand it. So I might not get it. Like, I might, there might be sorts of reasons. You might tell me something and I might be like, any kind of thing about yourself. And I'd be like, wow, I can't really relate to that. Like, I don't understand that. But I can't tell you, no, sorry, you're not experiencing that. That to me, that's overstretched, like that, and that's arrogant. And I think that a lot of the transphobic stuff that is just comes in streams. Now you've said anything, the sort of outpourings on the internet. It's just like a fear of the unknown as well. It's like anything. It's like, I don't get it, so it must be awful. And then it's just a humiliation.
But you were telling me that after the clip went sort of viral, you had some messages from people largely positive. And of course, the online sphere, Twitter, if you say anything positive about trans people, hell just seems to descend on you. And I guess for a lot of people, they get quite depressed when they see that. But you're saying it's important to know that Twitter isn't real life, and actually the responses in real life from real people was vastly different.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there was a lot of positive response. I think people sort of were really pleased that I'd put my hand up to Piers Morgan, told him to speak to the hand. I think people like that. But I think that much more seriously, it's people, queer people, trans people have sort of said to me, what he says and the narratives that he perpetuates make a difference in our daily lives. And parents of genderqueer kids have said to me, thank you for holding up some dignity for the experience of my child and creating like a sense of safety for them. I think a couple of people have written to me saying, I feel safe with you in the position that you're in, that you did that, because just thanks for not allowing this sort of really dehumanizing, degrading language and approach to be perpetuated. Because there is a serious thing. It's like, you know, in a way it's a fun clip. It's like, you know, I was sort of having fun with him, and that's the thing, and that's sure, great. I mean, but it is serious that if we talk about other people in degrading terms, it really impacts people's lives. And we know that the trans community, you know, have a vulnerability. I mean, it's incredibly challenging what they go through on the daily, but we know that suicide rates are high, mental health problem rates are high. We just need to treat everybody with respect and just, you know, accept people as who they are. It's basic, isn't it? It's just that simple.
The Labour Party and Wes Streeting, in their view, they made a political calculation to essentially throw trans people under the bus. I still remember Wes Streeting going on. It was like the Sun does print media, right? But I think they did like a podcast, The Sun of all places, and Wes Streeting simply says he basically just spouted transphobic BS. It seems like the Green Party are really the only party that have spoken up for the queer community. I mean, the Liberal Democrats, I feel like they've been iffy. It's been quite prominent from yourself, even from Zach Polanski when he was deputy leader. He said it was really important. So do you find that basically all parties will have issues, but the Greens are seemingly the leading voice when it comes to protecting minorities, including trans people?
Well, it seems to be the way. I mean, you know, I wish it wasn't. I think this should be a cross-party agenda to treat all people with respect, really. As in, I don't, you know what I mean? I wish this wasn't, I don't want this being party political football doesn't help trans people, actually. But certainly the Green Party is clear that trans rights are human rights, and we just fully respect these people and their experience. And, you know, like I say, I think it's, I don't know, often it's thrown, like people say I'm betraying women. I'm like deeply confused by that. I'm a feminist. I've worked in the women's movement. I used to run a women's film festival. Like I put probably 15 years hard work into that. And there is no contradiction. I just don't really understand that. And again, I just think it actually is enough to respect and honor people for who they are, and to treat them with respect at all times. It shouldn't be so hard.
The local elections results shown, the media can do this. Maybe the online sphere can be extremely reactionary, but I don't think ordinary people are really buying into it. I think you've had a really successful night. Well, I say 2 nights, actually. It took so long to count the votes. I know, it was 2 or 3 days. But I actually think, despite the clips online, despite, what Piers Morgan might say, I think generally people quite like decency, and it certainly hasn't caused issue for the Green Party. So appreciate you taking Piers Morgan to task. Always thoroughly enjoyable. But on behalf of our trans and queer viewers, it's much appreciated that the Green Party are not going to capitulate on this and are really pushing back.
Yeah, and I really hope that I don't think we'll ever lose that. And as I say, that, you know, that should apply to wherever people are coming from, really, and all different kinds of people. But I do think, I don't know, I think things are uniquely tough for the trans community in this country. Like when I went on Trans Pride, went to Trans Pride in Brighton a few months ago, and just sort of standing there listening to people and just thinking, I mean, just the depths of pain, really, in being told that you're not a legitimate person, that you don't, it's so kind of erasing, and this attempt to erase this community that's, again, these people have always been with us. Like, gender has never been that clear, and many people are, switch sides or in between. I mean, like many and few, it's a tiny percentage, right? But it's part of the broad, wonderful spectrum of humanity, and we should never want to shut that down. I mean, how horrible, what a thing to do to humanity, to try and sort of oversimplify. at the expense of individuals. So my heart is really with that community, and I sort of feel it and take it really seriously, that it's been an incredibly painful time with the Supreme Court judgment and the rest of it.
That was Rachael Millward, co-deputy leader of the Greens. Lovely to speak to her earlier. Ben, let's bring you in. I feel like you're itching to say something about Piers Morgan. Tell me, how do you think how do you think Rachael handled Piers?
Well, I think the question is more, how did Piers handle Rachael? Because he wasn't in control of that situation, and that's a good thing. I was a bit unsure at first who they were clapping, the audience, I mean, because there was, the applause sort of broke out, but it was a little bit unclear until afterwards Rachael got a moment to speak, and then there was very clear applause after that. So I'm guessing that the audience very much behind Rachael, and I think it's worth sort of walking it back a bit and saying that when these people are claiming that they're speaking for women's rights or concerns about women's rights, it really is worth sort of bringing it back to your basic definitions. So when we're talking about sexism, what are we talking about? Well, we're not just talking about the hatred of women or the hatred of men. No, that's not a good enough definition of sexism, because I think there are legitimate reasons in the case of men more than women, and I think only in the case of men actually, to be fearful or have an aversion to cis men. I think that's valid. However, I think that sexism is the attribution of negative characteristics to men or women on the basis of gender essentialism and the need to adjust society to account for those characteristics, right? So to give you an example of that, let's take an example from Glenn Gibbons, the guy we were talking about previously, the reform counsellor. He says that women belong in the kitchen, right? That's his belief. Why is that sexist? Well, it's because he is taking from his point of view, he is talking about women's biology and the need to push women into a certain social role because of the biological characteristics that he thinks they have. And that, of course, is that being the basis of misogyny. TERFs are misogynists. They literally are. People who are transphobic are literally misogynists, because from their point of view, Trump is a women's rights activist, right? Because Trump, who's in the Epstein files, millions of times, is a women's rights activist because he believes that trans women can't be real women. They occupy this topsy-turvy world where the women's rights position is that women are just talking vaginas. Legitimately, that is what their position boils down to, because you can, you put it to them and they go, well, no, I don't believe that women are just talking vaginas. Women are so much more than that. And then you go to them, okay, so what do you mean, like social construction? And they go, no, not social construction. Our biology is real. We face sex-based oppression. And they're right in a way that the oppression is sex-based, but it's based on gender essentialism. It's based on biological essentialism, right? And one of the ways that you can simply counter this is to go, well, what about intersex women? What about, say, women with Swires syndrome who have XY chromosomes? They don't fit that definition of all female, and yet they are still women. And they go, well, no. That's they're ordered in that direction. And you go, okay, so how do you decide who's ordered where? And they go, well, the women are the producers of the large gametes, right? So eggs, in other words, and men produce sperm, the small gametes. And you go to them, well, okay, but that implies that if it's all about gametes, that people who don't produce gametes, infertile people, must not have a sex. They must not have a sex, and therefore, under your view, not have a gender. It's a completely contradictory worldview that fails to sort of grasp the nuances of sex and gender. I'm going to just sort of talk about this just for a second, because I think it's really interesting. But it is a bit like trying to explain evolution to somebody who has just never encountered the concept before. And if they turn around and ask you, well, do you believe that we're related to chimpanzees? Right? If somebody had been asked that on Question Time, and we were in the period where that was a large debate, which actually is more recent than you might think, to a Christian evangelical audience who don't believe in evolution, who believe in creationism, the question, are you related to a chimpanzee? Common sense would dictate, no, we're not related to a chimpanzee or another ape like a bonobo, for example. And yet the answer is so much more nuanced, so much more complex. And Rachel is absolutely right. But let's talk about the sort of like strategy for a moment, because understanding why they're correct and understanding the correct strategy are two completely different things. And as you know, my mind has been on strategy a lot recently. I think this is where Tim Walz went wrong, dropping the whole the Republicans are weird. Tim Walz should have stuck with that strategy, and I'm hoping that the Greens are now going to start picking that up and using it against Reform UK, because it's so much more effective. It's so much more effective than the sort of like liberal niceties. And I'm sorry to a lot of the Greens out there who want to take the high ground. I do understand, but you've got to get nasty with it. You've got to start calling these creeps out for what they are, because they're not going to treat you kindly. You are going to have to start punching them back. And I think that there's different approaches to this. For example, like my favorite answer when people ask me, can a woman have a penis, is yes, but only if it's long enough that she can wrap it around her neck as a scarf, or use it as a draft excluder when she's watching Netflix. If it's smaller than that, then it doesn't count. Which I think is the best answer, because of course they're going to go, oh, you're not taking this seriously, and it's like, well, no, why would I take this seriously? If you want a serious answer, ask me a serious fucking question, right? And I think that's, in a way, what Rachel was doing there was like, come on, ask me a serious question. But the optics of this are really good, because, and I do just want to point out, I ratioed the fuck out of Piers more on Twitter, which, considering Twitter is such a fucking cesspool, I'm really happy with. And what I ratioed him with was a meme of the I can't remember the name of it, but it's the I think we should improve society somewhat meme, and the person popping out of the well and going, yet you participate in society, I'm very smart. And I just changed the person saying I'm very smart to, can a woman have a penis, and the sort of like crazy guy from another meme. And people like that. And why did that speak to people? Well, I think that spoke to people for much the same reason that Rachel got the applause there. It's because this entire framing is such a good setup for the Greens, right? Because Rachel was talking about the 99% versus the 1%. When she was allowed to talk, she was talking about the 99% versus the 1%. She was talking about inequalities within our society. She was talking about empowering ordinary people, right? And what did Piers Morgan come up with? Can a woman have a penis? Like, who the fuck cares, right? So somebody put the meme. This is the meme I was talking about. Thank you, Callum, if that was you that managed to put it on there. Yes, and the thing is, this is exactly what Rachel was doing, right? Rachel was doing that meme. Rachel was saying, we should improve society somewhat. And that means, by the way, some transphobes on Twitter seem to think that I was saying that we should improve society by advancing trans rights. I wasn't even talking about that. I was saying we should talk about the 99% versus the 1%, because I don't give a shit what's between your legs or what you identify as, what public fucking toilet you use. If I can't pay my rent, if I can't pay my energy bill, who the fuck cares what toilet a trans woman is using? Like, literally, who the fuck cares? And I think this has got to be the sort of narrative. It's so good for us. I cannot describe to you how good it is for the left, for us to be asked to be stating questions about stating statements about the cost of living and the crises that people are facing, and we need to address the energy bills, rent, the empowerment of local people feeling that they've got no rights at work, that they don't own their houses, and for the right to be going, yeah, but what about the trans woman? What about the trans woman? Because it's not just good for us in terms of like it's going to get us ahead talking about an economic message. It's also that we carry the trans people with us, right? It's because trans people benefit from that as well. Because if we're all singing from the same hymn sheet about cost of living, trans people's rights are going to be advanced because they're attached to the project of the Green Party. And when the Green Party take power on the message of cost of living, they can then put protections in place for trans people. The conversation doesn't need to be had there and then because the conversation is far too nuanced. The conversation needs to be redirected to cost of living and let them fucking whine about it. Let them moan about it. Let them complain about it. While we drag it over to cost of living, let them obsess over genitals. Call them freaks. Call them weirdos. Let's go. Let's fucking go. This is what I've been looking for.
I loved your analogy of evolution. Because yes, if there was a question time debate that happened all those years ago, right? And common sense will prevail, right? That we are not related, or we don't have a common ancestor with apes, right? That's what it is. They're like our cousins, right? We don't descend from apes, but they're a common ancestor. You would be jeered, like you're an idiot. But that's just because we didn't know enough about evolution in science. And it speaks to my point, what I said earlier, is like we cannot be arrogant to assume that we know everything there is to know about the human body. There is so much more we can learn. So I thought that was fantastic. I think your entire rant was brilliant. I agree with everything you say. Do not make these people feel comfortable. Make them out to be creeps because that's what they're doing. And guess what? The average person doesn't think about penis as much as Piers Morgan, right? Even if you're a randy gay man, you probably aren't thinking about penis as much as Piers Morgan. The average people do care about their material conditions. And I think, again, Rachel's and your assessment was fantastic.